Perfect. All right. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for attending the final BI user group event for 2024. We have a very special item on the agenda today. We have Scott from Microsoft presenting as the main presenter today, but I will get to that shortly. But first and foremost, thanks to all of you who have come and attended in person. It's nice to see everybody's faces, and for those of you who are online as well. Perfect. So I'm just going to start with a bit of an introduction and a welcome. My name's Kaylin Perry. I'm a data scientist or data engineer at Intellect, and I've been here for a few years, and I've loved the Power BI user group. I recently joined as a co-host, so this is a wonderful place to be to meet new people and see wonderful new things that are happening in our industry. We're then going to jump onto a fantastic talk by Scott, and then we'll follow with Q&A afterwards. So if I could ask for all of you to keep your questions, to write them down as we go through. We will have a time at the end to dedicate to questions that we can direct towards Scott. And then we'll have a few more insights, and Sven is going to share some things with us at the end before we close out for some pizzas for those who are in person. Perfect. So before I continue, I just want to give a very warm welcome to Scott, all the way from Microsoft. So Scott, thank you so much. We're thrilled to have you here today, and thank you for dedicating some time to share your thoughts with us. So Scott is a principal program manager at Microsoft. He is a recognized leader in driving data innovation. With expertise in Microsoft Fabric, Power BI, and Dynamics 365, he helps organizations across industries unlock insights, accelerate digital transformation, and make data-driven decisions. In his role, Scott plays a key part in delivering cutting-edge solutions with the Microsoft Fabric ecosystem, helping businesses maximize the value of their data. Previously, as a Dynamics 365 Global Black Belt and Senior Solutions Architect, he led teams that integrated BI and AI solutions, tackling complex CRM and ERP challenges. He is also a co-author of 2 highly regarded books on CRM best practices, further establishing his reputation as a thought leader in Microsoft and CRM communities. So today we are very excited to hear from Scott. Thank you so much. And I will hand over to you to hear about how we can drive insight and action with the Power Platform.
Well, thank you very much for that kind introduction. And thank you for the invitation to be with you guys. And it's exciting to see the growth and the expansion around the world of professionals who are looking at both dynamics and the intelligence platforms, the data platforms like Fabric, and really unlocking the value of some of the data we have sitting in our business applications every day. As you said, I started on Dynamics as my core platform. That's what I've started on. It comes up, I think in January, it makes 23 years since I started implementing CRM, Microsoft CRM, and beginning in those early days, the effort was all around just getting the application installed and getting it running. But over time, it grew into where we found that the more value we could bring was to help share, to help expose and use reporting tools, which were pretty rough at that time, reporting tools to try to bring to life the data that was being captured and processed inside these business applications. The first versions of it were Crystal Reports, which was a bit of a nightmare. And then they moved over to SSRS, Reporting Services. And that was a huge improvement. But the hurdle to get the data into it was a little bit higher than expected. So it was a little challenging. But you know, it gained a foothold, and I got excited about doing that. But then it became necessary to start saying, okay, not just individual records we're trying to report on. We want to understand what's happening over time and trending, and the analytics. And that's where when the Power Platform, the Power Pivot Pro came into Excel, SharePoint. There was a analytics piece that came into SharePoint, and then eventually Power BI about a little over 10 years ago now came out. And I felt like it was I saw it as a real transformational moment for customers using these business applications to take advantage of tools like Power BI and now Fabric to really expand on that and really gain some value out of what they're doing. There's so much effort that goes into like capturing and transforming data inside these business applications. And if you don't take advantage of it, it's like a wasted asset, all this incredibly rich data available to a business. And so that's really where I've planted my flag and looked at how can I help businesses and organizations take advantage of the data that they're already capturing. That's been a big part of what I've done, and I've put a lot of effort into helping Dynamics customers take advantage of reporting and analytics tools. But then there's another evolution on top of that, and that's really when it comes into the real-time analytics piece of it. Let me switch over to my presentation, and I've just got a handful of things we'll talk about, and then we'll move to some demos real quickly from here. So let me present this in Teams. I'll see if it'll present in Teams. Otherwise, I may just share my screen. Present. And it should show up. But again, the change that's taking place is that data in the real world moves. It's kind of, it almost seems obvious to say, but the data around us is moving at real time. And customers need to be able to take advantage of this data as quickly as it's available. And I'll say from my perspective, I spent a lot of time focused on delivering reports and generating a report. And I wanted to get that report as fresh as I could with the data as clean and up to date as possible. But I was always challenged with the realization that I could have the most up-to-date real-time data in my report, but I had to wait on somebody to open that report or to take a look at it and then decide on how to take action on that report. So there was even if my report was, in fact, at one of the businesses I implemented at, this is probably several years ago, there was a project manager that was raking me over the coals, really giving me a hard time. Just saying, we got to have our reports have got to be real time. Our reports have to be real time. And at that point, I really didn't have any good real time solutions for her that would that they could automate or process. It was a little challenging to get real time data at scale out of Dynamics. But as we kind of pushed forward, and I said, well, I can get it down to where the reports are showing up within a minute or so. I mean, the report's going to be possibly a minute. The data latency is going to be like a minute or so. No, that's not acceptable. We have to have the reports in real time. Okay, great. We worked harder and added the budget and worked harder and got closer to real time. But what I failed to ask and what I failed to realize was these real-time dashboards that they were so incredibly focused on getting real-time data in. They would take those real-time data and export it to a PDF, attach it to an email, and email it to the sponsors overnight. So the data, by the time it got, even though the data was generated real time, by the time it got to the sponsor's hands in their inbox, it could be several hours old versus looking at the data directly in Dynamics and seeing what's there. So there was this gap of real-time intelligence that was always challenging. So that's where I get excited about this process of being able to shorten that end-to-end latency, being able to shorten it, getting closer to how do we get to that data very, very quickly, and more importantly, how do we take action on that data, and how do we see it in context? So this is kind of the quick overview, and I'm not gonna spend too much time on the slides. I'd rather show you some demo if that's okay. It'll be a little more formal. It's a small group. It's a group we can be informal, and we'll have more fun that way. So in general, I don't know if you've, this slide, because Ignite was this week, my slide is one generation out of date. The Intelligent Foundation is these tools that are across Fabric, and they help you take advantage of that. And the last item on that list, the the middle one there, real-time intelligence, is the one we're going to be focused on. But there's other elements that have been added. Obviously, if you pay attention to the Ignite announcements, we've added SQL databases to to Fabric now. So like we had them in Azure, they're now available in Fabric. So that's been added. But we're going to focus really on this real-time intelligence piece of it, which includes a couple of things, a couple of elements of it. There's the event stream, which allows us to capture real-time events. Event house, where we can store them and hang on to them for a period of time for reporting in like a real-time dashboard. And then the reflex, or the activator side of it, where we can take advantage of that real-time data and turn it into something that's actionable and be active with that data. So that's the type of things we're going to, and of course we're going to, because of my background, we're going to tie this to Dynamics as part of the platform that we're going to engage with. So from a real-time dashboard perspective, intelligence demo, this is the kind of what I want to show you, just the overview of what's there. We're going to start with capturing the data in the streaming side of it, the ingestion side, and then we're going to move it. That'll move that in and take advantage of using a reflex to take action on that directly. Then we'll look at a little further situations where we're saying how do we do that, and then turn it into a dashboard. Let me switch from the deck, and I'm going to just go straight to my desktop if that's all right. Let me open my desktop, and let's see. Okay, should be sharing. Let me make sure that, are you able to see my desktop? It's just got a picture of some bicycles on it. Okay, great, thank you. So this example uses the idea of, in London, I don't know if you have them in Joburg, but in London there's bike racks where you can rent a bike for a few hours and pedal around the city. And then when you're done with the bike, you could return it to the same place or return it to another place, and just park the bike and just for recreational, just to tour the city. These rental bike stations are called bike points. They have to manage it with looking at when people rent the bikes, then there's obviously fewer bikes there for other people to rent. And then when people return them, they fill up the slots. And what you don't want to get into is a situation where there's no bikes to rent, where it's empty and there's nothing there for anybody to rent, or where on the other end, all the bike racks are full and there's no place for somebody to return a bike that they have. So it's kind of always this real-time balancing act to try to optimize what's there and what's not there, and how do we do that. We can see that happening in reporting in Dynamics. We can see the bikes, the number of empty docks there are, the number of unfilled ones, as well as the bike racks that are overcrowded. But we want to be able to take advantage of that, and we're going to take advantage of it in Power BI or in Fabric using the real-time analytics tools. So I'm going to start with just the idea of how to set this streaming process up. And I've got an example that you can actually rebuild in your own environment if you'd like. I've got the demo instructions and all the details of how to recreate this entirely from scratch. But I'm going to start with, let me open up the event flow, the flow side of it, the task flow. And I'm just going to use one of the out-of-the-box ones, which was, let me see, real-time event analytics. We'll select that one. And it gives me some ideas of things that how I'm going to go about getting the data, what I'm going to do to track it, store it, and then visualize it over time. But we're going to start with this idea of streaming data ingestion, and how do we get data coming off these IoT devices, coming from real-time sources, and start ingesting it. We're going to use an event stream. Event streams are that way to capture and transform the data. And I'm going to call it bike stream. I'll create that one. And it'll open up to this event stream. And think of this one as a little bit like a traffic cop. It just says, okay, I'm connecting the dots between external sources of the data, whether it be coming from a custom endpoint or from Azure Streaming, an Azure Event Hub, or some other place like that. Or in this case, I'm just going to use sample data, the bike data that's available, and we're going to call this bike point racks. Right, so we'll just grab that. And the sample data is set to bicycles. There's also taxi data as well as stock market data. And both of those have examples you can use to try to experiment with the whole process and take advantage of how you could use data streaming in from the real world and then ingest it and report on it and take action on it in real time. But I'm going to use the bicycle data. It's kind of a low impact one that's fairly simple data coming in. And so we can see the data now coming in. And this is, like I said, this is the sample data coming through. And as I watch this data, I'm seeing a couple pieces of elements coming in from the source. The bike point ID, that's just the rack. That's the set of racks that we have. And then where it's located, latitude, longitude, how many bikes there are currently at that spot, and how many empty bikes spots there are. And if I refresh that, I'll start seeing here's new data coming in, and it's being brought in as JSON format. So that's my source data coming in. That's my bike rack data. I've got the stream coming in. Now I need to connect it to some sort of an action on the other side of that. And what I want to do is look at the bikes and say, you know what? In a case like this one, this Gunmaker's Lane bike rack, there's only 2 bikes available. And here's another one where there's only 1 bike available. And you never know, that bike may actually have a problem, may have a flat tire or something. So you always want to be able to say, watching for when are there not enough bikes available for people to rent? And also when are there not enough places they could return them if they happen to bike across town and want to return a bike. You want to be balancing that. So we're going to look at creating some real-time responses to this bike data coming in and take action on it. Doing that, I'm going to use this and say, I'm going to send it to an activator. The name has sort of changed a little bit. It's an activator, or now at one point it was called a reflex. Other times it was called a data activator. They've sort of moved around on. I don't know if you've ever noticed that Microsoft, we're not great at naming things, but this is the activator. This is the way we respond to real-time events, is one way we can do that. And so I'm going to set up this data activator to listen to the data coming in. And if certain conditions are met, I'm going to take some action on it. So I'll start with this, and we'll go in here. We're going to create a inventory manager activator, and I'll just put it in my streaming workspace. And I don't have an activator there yet, so I'll create a new one. See if I can create a new one, and low bikes, and save that. Okay, so it creates it says I'm taking this is the pointer that says there's an activator over there that we're going to send data to. So again, we take the data from the source and we're sort of routing it to a destination. Now in the middle of this, I could install some transformational events like filtering it to a certain area. I could do some grouping or expanding or unioning just to clean the data up a little bit before I send it over. So there's some transition that you can do in this space. But let's take a look at what that now looks like. So if I go back to my streaming data, you'll notice that I've got the event stream, and now I also have an activator here. So let me open up this activator, and that would actually be, I can put it in place and say I'm going to add this to my data track, where I say there's my activator. I'm going to add it to my event stream here, my task flow. This task flow just sort of helps you organize the thoughts or the assets that you're going to use. It actually doesn't do anything other than help organize it and map out where you are in the process and all the tools that will go together to help you solve the problem. So in this case, I'm going to go into my my activator, click on that. and I'll see a couple things. Let's see. They just added this. This is one of those features that the day after I install it, after Ignite, new code comes out, and there's a new feature here. So let me see. Where is my source? I think. Well, I guess I can use my bike rental data. So event stream. You know what? I'm going to go back one step and go into get data. Actually, I'm not sure. So I'm gonna work with it like it is, and we'll have fun together, right? If it's all right with you guys, we'll populate that with the sample data. This is one of those changes to the UI that rolled out this week, and I forgot to test beforehand, so shame on me. So here's the data coming in. As we see the data coming in, we have this data coming in from the packages, and we have the events coming in, and these events are showing up. I tell you what, let me switch over to my one that I've already set up, just because I'm more familiar with the data that I have, and I'll give you an example of what that might look like, if that's all right with you guys. Let me switch back over to a different environment. This is one that I've already got set up, and you'll notice that I've got an event stream here, just like I set up in the previous one. And in my data track, I've got an inventory monitor activator. So let me open that activator up. I don't know if you ever demoed something and realized something changed while you weren't looking, but hopefully you'll. That's kind of the name of the fun. All right. So here's my events coming in from these bike racks. You'll notice that they're just different points on a line. It samples a handful of them. I could add other ones to it, and I can look at what the different bike racks are showing over time. But ultimately, I'm going to be looking for setting up rules to listen to that event stream. And you can see here, I've got some example of the data that over time you see the low bike, you remember the no bike value that we had coming in from the stream. I see that showing up here within this, and I can see that what that value is over time. And this one here has at 10:28 UTC, it was at 10. There were 16 bikes there, but a few hours later, an hour later, it was only 4 bikes. So we see kind of spiking and dips that are going on in this data. But what I wanted to be able to do is say, I want to respond to those changes of inventory over time and say, what's happening? How do I respond to it? And so I look for a value to say, I'm going to detect. So this first one is I'm going to monitor it. Now I'm going to detect conditions. And this condition I'm going to check for is when it becomes less than 5 bikes, when less than 5 bikes are there, and it stays less than 5 bikes for at least 10 minutes. So think about the choices you have there. If it's moving into a condition where it says becomes, that just means it's changing from where the condition is not true to where the condition is true within that time frame, and says, look, is it becoming less than or equal to this value? And not if it just happens to like blip for a second and say, oh, one person checked the bike out and immediately somebody else checked one in, where the condition changes and then stays at that condition for at least 10 minutes. That's the type of the response you can moderate or put a governor on how fast you're responding to the data, and what kind of conditions and what kind of activities do you do to respond to it over time. So in this case, I'm looking at it and say, I could look at things like becomes less than, becomes greater than, or even is. Now, is just says if it exists at that value during that time, do that. Even if it was that value before the time period started and that value after, it just is that value. But I'm looking for changes in the activity. I'm looking for things where things change to a new condition, and I'm going to respond to that. So in this case, I'm going to look for the becomes less than or equal to 5 bikes available, and it stays there for 10 minutes, meaning that it's something that's going to be persistent. We actually need to respond to that. And what we'll do is actually launch a Microsoft Power Automate, a flow, and take action on sending that out and sending somebody out to go deliver some bikes to that rack so that it's not empty. How many, quick show of hands, how many of you are using Power Automate in any of your implementations? Okay, Power Automate. Otherwise, it's, things like you've seen if this, then that, or other things like that from other providers. Power Automate is just a workflow process, part of the Power Platform that can listen to actions and take advantage of it. The difference with building this in the real-time intelligence side and taking advantage of it there is that we can look at it and say, not just when event happens, like for instance, I could build a Power Automate and say, when X is true, fire a response. That's pretty easy. But in this case, I want to say, I'm watching for it to change over time. And if it stays in that condition for a period of time, then I'm going to respond to it. So it's really a more nuanced way to trigger the event of the Power Automate. And so if you notice, I've got now here a Power Automate that I've launched a Power Automate bike activity, and I'm passing over to it both the name of the bike rack as well as what neighborhood and street the bike rack is in, so that somebody could then be alerted that they need to go move some bikes around. So let me show you what the Power Automate looks like that's responding to this. So here's my flow in Power Automate, and I can see that it's been firing every every few minutes. A couple hours ago, it's fired several times, and just like letting somebody know, hey, there's a bike rack in London that needs some attention. And what it looks like from the flow perspective is just the sense the beginning piece is just listening to that trigger. So when the data activator fires, when that fires, then we're going to go out and find the related bike point. And in this case, we're going to look up the data in Dynamics, listed as an account, where the account number is equal to the name of that bike rack. And so I'm just going and getting my master data. I don't know if it's not really the right word for it, but my master data from Dynamics, and relating this event that happened to the data that I have back in Dynamics. And then I go through the process of saying, check to see if there's open cases to avoid creating duplicates. If there's no active cases, then I'll go ahead and create a new case for it. If there is an active case, I'm just going to add a note to it and say, hey, by the way, this is still this service case is still open. We need to do something about that. So I'm just adding a note to it. But all that takes place, and then at the end of it, we're looking at a case in Dynamics. Let me go back over to Dynamics and show you what those cases look like. So here's my service cases that are showing up. Let me refresh here. Yeah, so these are my active service cases coming in from these bike racks. And you'll notice that these are being modified on, the last two were modified on, it's 9:07, it's about 20 minutes ago, my time here in the US. So these are being updated in real time as bike challenges come in. So like this case, this particular bike rack, what happened was as the stream came in, it said it was less than 5. The data activator listened to that and said, oh, it's less than 5. Is it less than 5 for more than 10 minutes? If so, we're going to respond and send a message over to Dynamics to have somebody go and deliver some bikes to that rack. And in this case, we can see the bike rack. We can see the details about it. Also, within the form inside of Dynamics, I've embedded a Power BI report that's listening to that real-time data. And this Power BI report is actually showing this in real time. This is I'm pulling from a streaming data set that I use. And if I scroll down a little bit, we can see that the update was 3:22 London time. So that's GMT 3:32. So it was updated very recently. This is how fast that report gets updated. and is alerted to say, hey, there's new data out here. So I'm creating these events and saving it. So this whole process of listening to, and we're effectively cutting out the latency. As we started with talking about latency, we're talking about we cut out a lot of latency to say we're not waiting for somebody to open a Power BI report, review it, and then decide which cases need to be created, and then send somebody out to create the case. We're going ahead and setting the rules in Power and real-time intelligence to listen to that data and then take action on the data. So it's really a nice end-to-end solution to be able to say, we've got the data, we're listening to it, and now we're going to take action on it. In the process of doing all this, the bike point and listening to the data and bringing it in, a minute ago I mentioned that we have these events coming in and we're going to report on them. So in the streaming source, in the original one, I just had it directed to an inventory manager. But in this case, I'm going to show you a different the streaming source that's a little more filled out, and show you an example of where I'm listening to the exact same data, but I'm routing it. I'm sending one case over to my inventory. That's that reflex that I created a moment ago, or so I see a moment ago. My inventory monitor is listening to that, but I've set up a separate stream here. The same data is being split and sent. One case I'm going through and adding a timestamp to the data. So in this case, I'm adding a timestamp to say, here's the data, what time it came in through the event stream. And then I'm sending it to what we call an event house. The event house is I don't know if you're familiar with Custo databases, but it's optimized for streaming data and allowing data to be written to it really, really fast in a really highly compressed approach to be able to capture things like telemetry data, IoT data, events coming off of applications. All that data can be streamed into an event house. Let me open up an event, this Custo item, and I can show you what that looks like. All the data is streaming in. Instead of writing it to a SQL database, which would be a much slower, much heavier process, this is really optimized for write once kind of data, where we just constantly logging the data and dropping it in that Custo database as fast as we can, as fast as it shows up. And it streams in, and if you'll notice the compression, I've got 55 megabytes of data in there. I've got it set so it only keeps a few days worth of data, 55 megabytes, but it compresses down to less than 10. So it's very efficient in that case where we're grabbing the data and we're bringing it in and seeing what's going on. I can look at the data like the table. Here's the table that I have set up. This is what the data looks like. And columns, et cetera, that are being captured. But also I can query the data using Custo, KQL. KQL is a language, or is a query language, kind of like SQL, but it's designed for Custo, where we can identify a table. Like here's one. Let's look at this first. We identify a table, and that's the bike point events. You'll notice that I've got, let's see if yeah. So I'm identifying a table here, and that points back to this table right here. And then I say where the event time is less than 24 hours ago. So I'm filtering out. I don't really care about data that's older than 24 hours in this particular query. And then I add another filter, like add a calculated field, sort of, called the doc fill percentage. So in my case, I wanted to show it not based on how many bikes are available or how few bikes are available, but I want to say what percentage is that bike rack full? Because some of them have 24 bikes, some of them will have 12, and I want to look at it a percentage basis. So I just take the data, round it off, divide the number of bikes by the combination of the number of bikes plus the number of empty bikes to get that. And then I summarize it and say, for the maximum event time, which is the most recent event, give me this data. And if I highlight it and run it, it runs that data. The amazing thing about KQL, if you're running against event stream, is the speed at which it can parse gigabytes and gigabytes of data and return these kind of really new, interesting result sets using KQL. And this is, again, part of this event house where we've got the data being streamed in and we can query it accordingly. Other ones, this one, a different query said, I'm going after this bike point events table, again, looking only the last 6 hours, and I want to project it. I want to look at it by each within the last three. I'm going to group it by 3-minute intervals. So I'm looking at all the data, and I want to see all the events every 3 minutes worth of the data and summarize it that way. And I can run that and pull back the same data where I see like Victoria bike. This one, I can see the data about what's going on in that. All that to be said is really the source that I use in Power BI. So in Power BI, I'm actually using these Kusto queries. In fact, let me open up the desktop, my Power BI desktop here. Oops. There's my desktop, where I'm looking at the data coming in. I go to the transform. The account data I'm pulling in from Dynamics, and this has the data about where it's located, the borough it's in, et cetera, that type of data. That's that master data that I described a minute ago coming from Dynamics. And then I combine it with the status data, that Kusto query that I have, and this shows me what for each bike point, what is the status, the most recent status available. If I go to the advanced editor, you can see right here, that's that same Kusto query I showed you in the event house. I'm just passing that back to Kusto and saying, or the event house, and saying, run this query and give me the results that exist right now. And I'm listening to that, and then I basically just convert the latitude, longitude to numbers. The same thing for the events over time. I can look at those and say, show me the data. Let me sort it. So let's just look at one of those bike points. Yeah, so now I'm seeing the data for the last 24 hours every, I guess I got a half hour on this one. So I can see all the data for that bike point over time. That's necessary. I use that to be able to graph the data. So when I bring all that together, I don't need to change anything. So now that gives me the top one. I'm getting that event status data. What's the most recent data for this event, for this borough or this bike point? And the bottom one, I'm seeing the graph over time, showing me half-hour increments for the last 24 hours, 12 hours, 24 hours, something like that. And I can see that data. And then I combine that, of course, with the geometric data or the geography data here to be able to see what that looks like. And it really gives you an interesting way to understand what's going on in the real world and be able to respond to it over time. And look at what's available. Look at spark lines to say, where are we seeing dips in the data? Where do we see pressure on a particular process going in? And looking at it from there, we can drill into a single bike point and look at that one and see what's going on with that particular bike point. So again, I've taken that particular bike point. If you'll notice, this one, we're seeing the streaming data as well as the current data. And then I've gone ahead and said, let me compare that to bikes in that neighborhood, the bike racks in that neighborhood, so that if I'm needing to get bikes to this location, meaning that we're empty, we don't have enough bikes here, I could look and say, oh, these two probably have excess bikes or have plenty of bikes. This one doesn't have enough bikes, so I can't go get anything from that one. But it just helps me reallocate those bikes around town. But that's taking that same data and bringing it into Power BI, and then ultimately taking that same report and embedding it in the business application so that users can take advantage of it. I'm going to pause here for a moment And because I've kind of gone through the end-to-end piece of it, I haven't. I'll show you a little bit about how you can set this up on your own, but I've gone through the end-to-end piece. But I wanted to ask, what's your thoughts at this point? What are you seeing, or is this interesting from your use cases?
Anybody in the room that wants to share?
Awesome. I mean, for real time, because Power BI is not real time. That's real time, and the analytics. It's awesome. It applies to more application now than before.
100%, I agree with that fundamentally. I mean, we see a lot of data challenges at the moment being very real time, especially if you look at like some of the social challenges we have in terms of healthcare and things like that, where rapid response is critical, and we don't really take advantage of that in the way that we should with the amount of data that we store nowadays. So I think this is fantastic to see that the capability of implementing this is out there.
Yeah.
Scott, I also enjoyed it. Obviously, I saw it in Sweden, and I loved it because it combined so many parts of the Power Platform and Fabric and all of that connectivity. It does make it a little bit awkward or nerve-wracking for people who aren't familiar with all of that functionality. Sure. But you've got to start somewhere. So, start with Data Activator with the London Bikes trial data, and then just see what it looks like, and then add the Power Automate step, and then add something else in the Event House and the Custo KQL stuff. If you haven't used it before, at least try this, and then you start to warm up to it. And it's a very, very real, relevant example. Okay, so it's bicycles in this case, but there are plenty of other things where you need to respond now. And so it really makes it very relevant.
Yeah, thank you. And it's an interesting, it really opens up these applications and these tools that we have, and to be able to say, the world, like I said at the beginning, the world moves at real time, which seems like an obvious thing to say. And the data around us is moving at real time. We need to be able to respond to it in some cases. Now, if you need to say, show me the history of this asset over the last 3 years, that's not a real-time report typically. I need to generate what's the total transaction sums for a massive data set. There's things that don't need to be real time. They just need to be reasonable. But things that need to happen instantly, where data needs to get through to the report in what's the actual status right now, that this really opens up some opportunities for us in that case. And again, I'm putting these data in at real time, and so we're actually seeing it change already a little bit. So it just moves through. Back at the higher level, at the report side, again, this is just in Dynamics, and I pull the data in to say, let me see what it looks like across the board, and then I can from there take action on it. If you're not familiar with the Dynamics side, or if you've used Power BI, I also have some examples where I'm using the sales data and pulling the sales data in and sharing it on the inside of Dynamics. And this is a sample dashboard that I've created that attaches to Dynamics. And anyone who's interested, you can have a copy of this one. And it goes through and shows you how to connect Power BI dashboards into Dynamics and take advantage of them. And I can do the same thing with the accounts and say, like, here's a Roadhouse account that's for a reseller. And if I go to that record, I'm in Blythe Road Wheelhouse. It'll pass that down into the report and dynamically filter the report to just the record I'm on. So I have a contextual filter put onto this report automatically. And so if I switch to another retailer like Arlington Street, it'll take Arlington Street Urban Wheels, pass that down as a filter into the report, so that it's pulling back just Arlington Street Urban Wheels and gives me that data in context. So that's not really part of the real-time piece, but I just wanted to share that was an element that you can grab from this process. I did mention earlier on that I've done something that I feel like I need a little bit of a blue ribbon for. I actually documented this whole thing, and I probably need to go back and check my documents because it was all up to it was up to date a month ago, but I probably need to change some things. But it walks through the process of how to set this up in your own environment, pieces of it that you want. It walks through how to set the reflex up. It's got a full, let's see where it is. There is a, yeah, so I've got a document here. If I go to that document, you'll see there's a large document that goes through it step by step. In fact, if I go to RTI, let me go to my GitHub. This is all sitting on GitHub for you. And Expert Lab. So I'll just show you what the report, what the document, what the instructions look like. Just because I went through a pretty extensive process of documenting it. Here's the outline of it. It's 75 pages, but it's mostly screenshots. It walks you through how to get the data set up in Dynamics, how to filter on it, how to create the real-time tasks coming in, and how to respond to those. Again, 75 pages, mostly screenshots though. So it should be fairly easy to consume from that perspective. But I'd encourage you to give it a try. It's also got the reports in there as well. If you happen to be Dynamics, have customers who are using Dynamics, we do have an ability to take Dynamics data and bring it into Fabric as a Delta Lake, and bring it in part of one lake, and be able to report on that data as well. There's a little bit of latency between Dynamics and when it's there, but you hit that data store, and you can consume those data at scale through that. But I do have this. I have that set up as examples here on my GitHub. If you wish, let me go ahead and drop my GitHub repo into the chat window. So the first one there is the real-time intelligence, and then I'll drop in my overall repo. So that's in the chat window, so you can see how to get to it. But it's really just, oops. It's really just going to GitHub and look for me. It's M. Scott Sewell. My first initial is Michael, stands for Michael Scott Sewell, and M. Scott Sewell. And you can go to that, and I put everything up there. I do a lot. Most everything I do is directed towards helping customers take advantage of Fabric, the data and analytics tools, specifically in the context of Dynamics. That's really my focus area is helping those two products work together. So I'm happy to be able to share any of that, and also be a part of the conversation if you have questions. So I'll pause there. Any other questions? Any questions along that line? We've kind of got, I think we're kicking right up against the top of the hour here. I don't want to be the one that stands between you and pizza.
Well, first and foremost, I think everybody please give Scott a big round of applause. And yes, as you mentioned, if there's any questions, for those of you who are online, please just raise your hand, and anybody in the room, will start with the room first and then go to the questions online. Any questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Question here.
Hey, Scott, I'm Steve. I'm just curious, so you were talking about adding additional transformations in the real-time stream, and I was wondering, what is the effect of that on the cost of running the stream and also just the latency of running the stream?
I haven't seen. They're very simple transformations in the event house. They're like adding a field, adding two fields together or something. I haven't seen that as being a big impact on my environment. And I'm not doing anything like crazy complicated in that process. It's mostly just sort of refining the data before it hits the event house. Once it gets to the event house, you can do a lot more like in your query. But in my case, I just wanted to add a timestamp to it. Was the only transformation issue I had. So I can't really say. I don't have the experience of like building out complex transformations in there. So I would have to defer to trying it out before I could do that.
Okay, cool. I have another question.
Yeah.
So my first thought on this activator thing is like, when you're having typically we have a table in these data platforms where you're processing data all the time, where you kind of store your logged events, you store how many records are being inserted into tables, those kinds of things. And my first thought about when I saw Activator a couple months ago, it was like, have a look at the number of records being inserted into this table, and if it dips out of a certain range or into another range, then send an alert saying, hey, you need to look at your query, maybe something's going wrong with the data. Have you ever seen an implementation like that? I was just wondering.
Yeah, so there's a couple of pieces like that are going to start saying, in Data Activator, in that the event stream, we're going to start adding events based on KQL queries. So as a query happens, you can set up a KQL query and say, here's a condition we want to test for. And based on that, we want to fire this result. I haven't seen, in my case, I haven't looked at anything that just listens for the number of records in a table in SQL, unless I'm just polling it. I'm just running a query every so often saying, okay, anytime that if I poll this table to a select star or whatever, or select count, if it's less than X, then fire an event. I could actually do that in Power Automate on its own. I wonder about, that's an interesting idea, Sven. Let me think about that one as to monitoring change. If I'm understanding your question correctly, or you're understanding your idea correctly, you're listening to changes in the amount of data in a table over time, and in cases where maybe a lot of data gets into it or a lot of data comes out of it, if it gets emptied out, then that would be the event that you would be monitoring for and then take action on that. Is that an accurate restatement of what you're describing?
It's close. It's more like we run and we insert some data every day or every hour, and then we see, okay, usually we insert like between 100 and 500 records on every run or something like that. And then we run it and we see, oh, we're getting 10,000 records. That's a really weird run. Like, we need to investigate what's going on there, something like that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting. What is the mechanism you're using to insert the data?
So in this actual example, so we're running, we're using Databricks, and we're running the Databricks workflows that inserts data into Delta tables. Yeah.
It might be interesting to say if the workflow can, at the end of its workflow, send an event to the log to say, okay, I started this time, I took this long to do the insert, this is the number of records that I inserted, et cetera. That event that the workflow runs and fires could be sent to Kusto, and you can use that both for responding immediately as well as looking at trends over time. When are your volumes growing up, or when do you need to allocate additional space for a spiking of the data, or when, that would be an interesting approach to it. But I'm thinking in terms of, we're doing that with some business events inside of Dynamics to say, when this event happens, whatever that event is, this event happens, I want you to stick a record into the event log to say, this event happened, here's the stat, here's the sort of the metadata about that event, the number of records, the time it took to do, and et cetera, the time the event time. We're going to stick those things into the Kusto log and use that to measure as a real-time look at when, like service cases, like, and think of a call center where you have a bunch of people on telephones, and people are picking up the phone and hanging the phone up constantly through that room, and each time they take one of those actions, we're sticking it in that, and that way we'll be able to dashboard how many agents are available at any given time. But it's kind of a parallel idea to what you're looking at, is say, here's an event that's happening regularly. We want to listen to some metadata off of that, stick it in the KQL or in the event stream, and then from that we want to possibly take action on it if it meets certain conditions. Yeah, so it's an interesting. There's so much in that real-time space that starts becoming possibilities with with the tools that are available.
Amazing. Thank you for that answer. Are there any further questions online? Fantastic. It seems like everyone has asked their questions. So I want to just thank you again, Scott, for dedicating your time, very valuable time, for an hour to share such valuable insights with us. I'm sure everybody in this room saw something for the first time today, and it's something we can definitely use going forward in our careers as well. So thank you very much again.
I know that I saw something for the first time today, part of the demo. So we all got something new out of it today. So anyway, well, thank you so much for the invitation, and good luck to all of you. Have a great event, and then I look forward to seeing you at FabCon in Vegas in the spring, hopefully. Anyway,
that would be fantastic.
We look forward to seeing you and saying hello. Cheers,
everybody
everyone.
else online, yeah, Scott, you're welcome to jump off, or you can stay on for the closing ceremony, but we do understand your time is valuable, so if you need to go, thank you again. Can we have another round of applause for Scott? All right, awesome. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to just quickly reshare my screen, and we can just do the final close out today. There we go. Is it sharing? Taking some time. There we go. Okay, perfect. All right, so we just have some announcements. So there's no event in December. This is the last one for 2024, as I mentioned at the beginning of the event, but we will recommence in January 2025, and I'm sure we'll have a lot more exciting talks like this one to come next year. And then just point number 3, this is something very important to us, Sven, Steph, and myself. We really do value your feedback. If there's anything about the BI user group that we can improve, or suggestions, we really would like to hear from you. So please, the QR code is on here. Please scan it and fill out the survey. We will be running that survey a bit more frequently next year as well, so we can be a bit more responsive to your feedback and your options and ideas. So Sven, I do want to hand over to you, I think, before we close out finally. Sven also has some announcements for today.
All right, cool. Thanks, Kaylin. All right, so just 2 quick announcements apart from the survey. The one is, the last 2 years we've had the Global Power Platform Bootcamp, which is normally late February, early March. It is happening again next year. It is a global event. And there are a few of us who are organizing the South African or the Johannesburg version. That will be on Saturday, the 1st of March. Okay. It was a full-day event this year and last year, but we're actually going to trim it down to make it a little shorter, because the afternoon people sort of didn't have the energy to stick it out all day. So anyway, the point there is, please diarize the 1st of March. That's the first part of that comment. The second one is, if any of you are keen to do a presentation, remember the Power Platform is, Power Automate, Power Pages, Power Apps, Power Virtual Agents, and then of course the product that we all love, Power BI. So, you don't have to be a Power Automate expert to present there. You can do Power BI if you would like to. If you are keen, there is a call for speaker link, which I'll just put in the chat now. And that closes on the 6th of January. Okay, so early in the new year, we're going to evaluate all the presenters and finalize the agenda. But in the meantime, well, in a few seconds, I'll put the URL in there. Just try it. Don't be intimidated. Just give it a shot. This is a little scary. I mean, I've presented and I've been scared. The point is, the people in the audience are friendly, and if you make a mistake, it's no issue. Don't worry. Just take a step. Okay. All right, so that's the first announcement. The second one is Microsoft has a big conference called Ignite. It's actually on in America. It's in Chicago. So Wednesday night, was it Tuesday? Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
19th.
Yeah, that's right. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday night for us. And then they announced something really, really big. So obviously Fabric has a whole lot of different workloads and things like that. They've combined the 3 Synapse workloads together. They say to make space on the PowerPoint slide. So they've combined the three blue ones, the data warehouse, the data engineering, and the data science ones. And they're now calling that analytics. Okay, but on top of that, they've added something called SQL databases in Fabric. Now, they've asked us to just publicize that because that is, in their minds, one of the biggest announcements in Fabric so far. And obviously, they bring out new stuff all the time. So this is an enormous step forward. One of the things that it can do is help with Power BI and write back. So in your Power BI report, you can actually capture stuff, and it literally pops up straight away because it's pointing to a Fabric SQL database that's linked to Power BI, and it's actually beautiful. So anyway, what am I trying to say? The thing is, they know that this is such a big feature that they want to train people on it and how to use it. And they're saying that they've got guided learning starting on the 3rd of December. Okay, so I've got a URL for that. So if you're keen to, particularly those who are into SQL, okay, like SQL data engineers, you basically now have Azure SQL inside of Fabric, okay, and it mirrors to the Parquet files, which is why it's good for analytics, and it's in the OneLake story, and it's all of that stuff. So it's real time. It is actually an amazing, amazing thing. So if you're keen on that, I'll just put the URL in there.
Email.
I don't know how to do that on the Meetup side of things. Can we? Okay.
It's like a chat section on Meetup. We can try post it there.
Okay. So then these two links, I'll put in the chat now, the Teams chat, but for the Meetup, we'll just put those things in there as well.
Perfect.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah, that's cool. Oh, sorry, there's one more thing.
You had some.
The prizes. The prize.
Yes.
Yeah, I nearly forgot. Okay, so I did say in the previous two sessions ago, this is unfortunately our first one in person. When I was in Sweden, and they met all the user group leaders, they gave out a little bit of swag, and they said, well, maybe give it to someone who attends very regularly. So the clear winner, is Ezra. There is something for the summer heat, a Fabric cap. Okay, so there's that for you. And then there's something for the weekend, a Fabric scarf. I'm not sure if you're ever going to wear that, but nonetheless, there it is. So thank you for being such a regular attendee. And then for other people who are in person, there are a few other little things here and there, some stickers, and then some little charges and things like that. I'll dish them out. And some little patches as well, but we'll dish them out when we're eating pizzas and stuff.
Perfect.
Okay. Now I'm done.
Okay, thank you so much, Sven. So thank you everybody again online who's joined. I will leave up, or I'll also post a picture of the survey in the chat as well for those of you who want to screenshot it from there and go and fill it out in your own time. But thank you so much for attending the last session. I really hope it was valuable and insightful. And thank you to those of you who've also come in person. And I wish you all a very wonderful December and happy festive season. And we'll see you back in the new year. Thanks very much.
Thanks.